Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And you know, when we want to get updates, we want to find out what's happening parish-wide and get a little insight about maybe how things are going, we always turn to Earl Eues. Earl, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Keith, good to be here today.
I appreciate that. Of course, Earl Eues, Director of Terrebonne Parish Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. And, you know, Earl, we always kind of like to start off our segments talking a little bit about COVID. I have found, and it's not just because my parents here in these last few weeks, but there's been quite a bit of COVID. And I think it's probably because these holiday get-togethers and people kind of get together and maybe not mitigating as much as we did in the past.
Yeah, we're seeing a little uptick. We've seen some cases, more cases than usual, like through parish government, the workers.
Right.
When I say, I mean, it's not like it was
right.
2.5, 3 years ago.
Right.
And some other businesses have seen some upticks in the number of employees that are calling in sick with COVID. So, you know, the holidays, everybody's getting together, more parties, and, you know, family get together. So we're probably going to see an uptick for the next couple of weeks. So, and, you know, like we've been saying all along, if you're not feeling well, take a COVID test. And then if you don't have COVID, then, you know, do your precautions that you would have done regularly. If you're feeling really, really bad, you may have the flu.
Right.
So you may want to go see the doctor. We need to continue to wash our hands, kind of, you know, keep our distances from people, and wear a mask if you're sick and you don't want to spread it all over the place, or if you're concerned that you may catch it, wear a mask. And you know, people really need to go get their booster.
Right.
Because it is specific for the Omicron, and that's what's going around at this time.
Right. And quite frankly, those people, I talked to a couple of different people, they asked in a healthcare facility that didn't mandate masks, and several are, by the way, you know. They say, you know, once we start getting into what they consider the red, they get back into masking. And so a lot of the facilities are. There was one that was not, and several of the staff members they said, I just feel more comfortable with a mask, because I've got to get close to people to help and treat them, and so I just feel a little more comfortable, and it makes sense.
Yeah, and you know, the people that are catching COVID right now, they're not extremely ill where they have to go into the hospital.
Right.
So a lot of people are still getting treated with some of the drugs that are available to treat COVID. I think Paxlovid is one of them. So when they get it, they're able to use that.
Right.
So,
unless you're on a blood thinner. And then you can't use that.
You got to get a prescription from your doctor.
Right,
so
right. Well, but I mean, there's some people that need to be aware of that. I don't want them to just think that that's.
And I think some statins you have to get off of if you're taking it. But anyway, just be cautious.
Right.
And that's what we need to do. I mean, even if we didn't have COVID around, we're having a bad flu season.
It's a really good point.
So, you know, social distancing, washing your hands, and using hand sanitizer, and wearing a mask would probably prevent you from getting the flu.
Right.
If we never had COVID before.
Yeah, and so Jen makes a good point. You know, the flu we're starting to find that the flu's really starting to get people. I've had a couple of friends who had both at the same time. They had COVID and the flu, and boy, it's just lasting impact for quite a while.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of children with some respiratory illnesses also, more than what we've had usually. And then I've noticed on the news that they're having a hard time, like even finding Tylenol, children's Tylenol, children's Motrin, and stuff like that in the grocery stores and the drug stores. So.
Yeah, and so we're still. It's interesting that I don't want people to think that these things are kind of over, but we're still having issues with supply chain since COVID, and then on top of that, in our area, still with Ida.
Yeah, I just find it unusual that, you know, we're having a supply chain issue with like children's Motrin or children's Tylenol.
Yeah.
You know, and other children's cold medicines. It's just
antibiotics, diapers.
And then look at it from the other side. You know, when we were in the COVID years, you know, the last 2 years, we were separated from each other. We didn't, have all these gatherings, and the kids weren't getting sick.
Right. By nature of the avoidance,
Right.
because of the situation.
Less children were getting sick
Right,
with
right.
respiratory illnesses and other illnesses. So the supply and demand on the cold medicines just weren't there.
There weren't, and now,
And now, the demand's there, and the manufacturers are going to have to catch up.
yeah, and so that supply and demand that we learned about way back when we were in school, it's a little different dynamic than it used to be.
Yeah, well, we're such a global economy now that
Right,
a lot of
right.
things come from overseas, and it takes time to get it from overseas to here.
Right, and some of the conflicts that we've seen overseas as well makes an impact as well. Not that that's a political ideology. That is just the reality.
Right.
Of how things impact that supply chain and how things are coming and going.
Yeah, and it every month, every year, it's going to get better and better.
Right. As we kind of continue on with that, and Santa came, and such a good thing. But boy, he brought some of the cold weather from the North Pole with him, huh, Earl?
Yeah, it's some of the coldest weather we've had since probably around 1989. So,
Yeah, when we had snow, right?
Yes, and then it got pretty chilly here. Some of the readings I was getting with the wind chill was like about 10 degrees.
Yeah, 10 to 12 degrees.
Yeah.
It was something. And the wind that came with it, that's just kind of one of those things. It was, and it was, kind of the Thursday before Christmas. That wind, just the temperature changed some 35 degrees in a few hours.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's what causes your wind chill.
Right.
The stronger the wind, the lower your wind chill is going to be. But I'll take the 10 degrees that we had compared to the minus degrees that some of the North Louisiana had
Right.
in Arkansas, Tennessee area. So,
Texas.
Yeah, in Texas.
Yeah. My brother sent me a reading that very day. In fact, that very day, that storm system that had moved in, and this was a cold weather system that moved through, and it was 6 degrees there. With the wind chill, it was -6 in Frisco,
Right.
Texas.
Wow.
That's cold.
That is cold.
And interestingly enough, the humidity kind of dropped, and then right after Christmas, that humidity started to climb. It felt colder with a higher temperature, and that's just the nature of humidity and how water impacts our area.
That's correct. And, we start getting that water and flow coming in off the Gulf sometimes, and
Right.
it creates moisture for us.
Right.
Fortunately, we didn't have that actual a low pressure system running across the Gulf while this thing was coming down, because that would have created icy precipitation, and we would have had a lot more issues within the parish than what we had during this cold spell.
Yeah, and they were really clear with us. Some of the companies that provide electricity were very clear with us about the problems with cold and wet. And so, for lack of a better term, they kept saying precipitation, but when it's just cold, it's better. But that cold created some water issues for us, and that people were, I know, running water to keep from pipes freezing and being very prepared for that. But it got our water pressure really low, and we had to make some changes parish-wide.
Yeah, so, typically when the temperature falls below 28 degrees, they typically issue a hard freeze warning. And when we have a hard freeze warning, there's a possibility of your pipes freezing over. I got to give a shout out to Mike Sober at the Consolidated Waterworks District and all of his employees who worked throughout, this event, which was through Christmas.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. They worked constantly.
Yes,
trying to improve this.
they had some water main issues that they had to take care of, and I even think they had an accident where a car hit a fire hydrant and spewed water all over the place. So, these guys have to go out and have to repair that, especially in this time when other people are dripping their water. But I can tell you this, Mike Sober and I were in contact the whole time, and he's good about giving us information. He says the plants can make the water. There wasn't an issue of producing clean water. The issue was, and the issue wasn't people dripping their water.
Okay.
The issue was broken pipes.
Okay.
So especially down the bayous, where we have a lot of camps.
Right. A lot of raised.
And most of these camps are raised.
Right.
And a lot of these people don't live here.
Right.
the camps. They live out of town,
Or out of state
and
even.
they don't have somebody to come down and run the water, or turn the water off or drip the water.
Right.
So their pipes end up breaking, and there's free flowing water constantly.
Right.
In these areas. So that's, pretty much why they lose that water pressure down the bayou areas. And and like Mr. Sober said, we can produce the water as much as we need. We just can't keep the pressure up because of the number of the line breaks they had.
Right. And it's just one of those things. We feel badly for those people that have had those situations. And I'm hoping that we can kind of, I'm hoping that, for those people that have had that situation, that they realize, all right, next time this happens, maybe I can have a different plan.
Yeah. That's just the nature of my business that we're in, being prepared. When I knew we were going to have a hard freeze, I'm like, I need to go get some water. I need to stack up on water. It looked like a hurricane was coming.
you were hurricane ready.
I had
right, for the
five
ice.
cases of water in case we did go under a boil of water. We had water to drink. And you can still boil it for a minute on the rolling boil, and you can still drink it and use it for whatever you need.
But it tends to be a little hot, Earl.
Yeah, well, you got to boil.
And if you're thirsty,
you got to have two pots.
Right, you got
one
That's
ready
exactly
to go
right.
and one boiling.
Yeah.
But
takes away from cooking for Christmas, though.
Yeah, if it's just like anything during the whole year. You should be prepared in case something happens. You can have a major water line break in your neighborhood just on a regular day due to some malfunction.
Right.
And you may be that little neighborhood area may be under boil water for a couple of days. Right. And the issue is you got to do the repair.
Right.
You got to get the pressure back up.
Then you got to test the water.
Then you got to test the water, and usually it takes a day or two to get that test back.
Right.
To determine that it's clean water.
And when it happens when you make that decision or have to make decision, as Mr. Sober had to on Christmas Eve, you got to make that decision kind of at the 9th hour on a holiday, at the start of the holiday. And so it just kind of trickled, if you will, down to the decisions that had to be made, and then come Monday. We were able to recover.
And look, it's a tough situation, for Mr. Sober to make that decision on a holiday weekend,
right.
when he knows everybody needs their water, that he's going to have to, put out a boil water effect.
Right. They're still here later in the week, still dealing with a boil water order in some other areas.
Yeah, the Gibson area is still under a boil water, Black Gibson area, as of yesterday.
Right.
And then we have an area on Highway 56 south of the Boudreaux Canal towards Cocodrie.
Right.
And it's my understanding that the pressure, they're repaired and have the pressure up. They're just waiting on test results.
Right, and that's just really good news. Again, it's part of the process. It takes a little while to be able to get that stuff and get those results back, because they have to test the water in all of those different areas.
That's correct.
So once the pressure comes up, they got to test the water in those different areas. And so that's it's part of the process. And it kind of leads to kind of thinking about how we've done over this last year about processes. We've done some remarkable things with getting the state to help with trailers that never done that before. I think the recovery process from an internal standpoint and from a government standpoint has gone probably as well as it can go.
Yeah, I wish it'd be a little faster for those that are still in temporary housing and still waiting on some funding to do some repairs. We're going to have some money coming down from the federal government in different programs. It just, unfortunately, it takes a while to get that money down to our area.
So the money's been approved. It's the process of getting it where it needs to go.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I think the Lake Charles area is still trying to get some of that funding in place with some of their residents, which 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
So
going on 3. Yeah.
Going on 3.
Right.
So, but just continue to have faith. Help your neighbor.
Yeah.
And just think about these people that are still in temporary housing. The state has done a great job bringing caseworkers down and trying to work with everyone to try to get them a better solution than what they have. And so that process will continue until we can get all these people out of these temporary housing.
And I know Chris Pulaski was very clear about kind of the transition, if you will. They're really nobody's going to see it, but the state is now going to be taking over all of that.
Yeah, and they have. people are moving out of the temporary housing.
Yes, they are.
I mean, if you take a little ride down 311 and go to Rebecca Plantation, you'll see there's a lot less trailers there now than what they had.
Right.
Okay. But we still have a lot of people in transitional housing right now, and it's going to be a little while.
Yeah. Do we have any issues with the cold and some of those? Did you get any reporting on that?
No, we did not.
That's awesome.
The state pretty much tried to contact everyone and make sure everyone knew that they need to drip their water in those
Right.
campers, and then the FEMA did the same thing to contact the ones that are in FEMA housing to make sure they run their water
Right.
So that they don't have any busted pipes.
Yeah, and that's the real big issue when it comes to that temporary housing. Just if you drip your water, it because those pipes are much smaller than we would see.
Well, that's correct.
In those, and less volume, those kinds of
Yeah.
things. And so, as we look back, is there anything that you think that's been really good that you and your team have kind of learned? We've learned that we appreciate how well you do things. We've learned that y'all get it done, and we appreciate it. But is there something that you can kind of point to that y'all have learned?
You know, there was a couple things. You know, fortunately, we had a year without any major hurricanes,
right.
or even being in the cone
Right,
of
right.
area for Louisiana. You know, but I do want people to know that I think this is the 6th consecutive year that we've had a major hurricane hit somewhere in the Gulf Coast. Okay.
6 straight years.
Yeah, because we had something go into to Florida this year,
correct,
on
correct.
the Gulf Coast side.
Right.
So you know, the things that we have learned, especially in our office, it's never perfect.
Right.
So we're always trying to improve things to get things improved. So, you know, we got some logistics issues that we've worked through at our office. We've improved our communications tremendously.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, a great example is all this information about what we could do to prepare for this water issue with the cold. You know, communicating out. Those have been some wonderful messaging. Hey, we need to conserve water, and all of that was done very, very well. That's a good example.
Right. You know, and so we've implemented an app that's on smartphones that you can get instantaneous messages, and we do that and push out whatever we can. We've increased our capacity for communications in our buildings during an event. We're fixing to put up several Starlink systems around the parish and our public safety buildings, which will, it's going to increase our communications. And we were fortunate to be able to get we call it it's a FirstNet device, mobile device. It's the size of a small trailer, I would say.
Okay.
That we can implement at any time we lose communication, cell phone communication. We can put this up and it runs off the satellite, and we can get some service in a 1 mile radius of where we are. Right. So we will always have some type of cellular service on our FirstNet system, which is a system that's specifically for first responders and public safety agencies to use during a time of an event.
Wow. Well, I got to tell you, just being able to look at those things, see what we need, and be able to put them in place is just remarkable. Because big ships take a lot of water to move, and so sometimes those things take a little time, like we've seen with monies coming in, those things. But it's nice to see that y'all have kind of looked at that and saw what we need to do.
Yeah, and it's the end of the year. I'd like to give a big shout out to Parish President Gordon Dove and his administration for supporting us. Sheriff Tim Saunier and the Sheriff's Office, Homewood Police Department, all the fire departments.
Yeah, they've done a good job,
Yeah.
and your team as well. Yeah. We appreciate that. And that will do it, guys, for this particular segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. I like my local programming here on HTV.